Hello, everybody. Just starting out another cruise. I'm literally pulling out of my parking spot in the driveway. So, if you like the podcast that you've heard so far, give me a like or a subscribe. Comments are always welcome. I enjoy hearing what everybody's got to say. If you have any requests for a podcast, please let me know. If you want my opinion on things, I wouldn't mind, even if it's something that I'm not up to speed on. Doing a little research over a weekend and figuring out my opinion on something that I might not even know about. So, always up to become more informed on things. So, I had a random topic that came into mind last night. And it's something that I have seen shared on Facebook groups, and just various people that I know have posted it on Facebook, that I disagree with the idea of for a multitude of reasons. Now, there's a logic to it, and I'll go through the pros and cons in my opinion of it. There's a group I'm in on Facebook. All it is political discussions, and then I've got friends and family members that will just say we don't see eye to eye politically on all the things. Well, there has been some talk around revoking 501c3 status from churches, which that's charity nonprofit. So when you do that, you can have a church that takes in donations, tithes from the congregation, and they don't have to pay taxes on that money. See a neighbor I know. Anyway, there are people that have posted opinion pieces, people that have written Facebook posts and comments on taxing churches, simply due to the fact that it would generate a huge amount of tax revenue, and there's no disputing that. There's a lot of money that's being given to the churches, and if you tax that at kind of a normal LLC tax rate, it would generate billions of tax dollars a year. Okay? That's fine, and I understand the United States federal government is running at a deficit, but I think personally that's more on the spending side, not on the intake side. I don't think the federal government has taken in more money than it ever has, but it's spending more money than it can ever take in. So I don't particularly think that the argument of taxing $5 to $15 billion worth of taxes out of churches is an answer. And on top of that, that's like 8 to 12% of what the federal budget deficit is, so not really going to make a huge difference, in my opinion, and I could be wrong. Now, here is the problems that I have with that. First off, there are a lot of things that churches do in the communities that they can do simply due to their budget structure. Give you a couple examples of churches and various things that are put on in the community by local churches. There is a Walk for Life, which is local, that donates money to a crisis pregnancy center that helps women not only be informed and make a decision to choose to not have an abortion, but also helps them financially with things like diapers and playpens, bouncy seats, car seats, clothing items, things like that. So if a woman is considering having an abortion due to the financial strain that a child can bring, and I know that they can because I've got 4 of them, they can help alleviate a lot of that financial strain due to donations that are given by churches. Some of the other things that churches do in my general area: there is a soup kitchen that's ran for the homeless. There is actually shelter that's ran for homeless. They have different church buses that pick up homeless people and they have bought cots and such, and they set up for a night and they feed them in these churches. They help them get clean clothes. They have clean bedding, clean linens, and things like that. And specifically in the winter months in my area, because summer's not the season where you're at risk as much. But anyway, during the worst of the winter months, they have made arrangements for 7 days worth of shelter for homeless people. And I think that it would be worth expanding into the summer months. You know, if you've got volunteers that would be willing to do it, go for it. And all that is, I mean, you're talking gas, food, electric, because a lot of churches during the week, they do not run their heating or cooling systems at a normal temperature. They just keep the pipes from busting. They run clothing closets. A bunch of volunteers show up, help organize clothes by size, etc., and condition. All of them are donated. There are some days that they are sold to help cover the overhead of the electricity for the building. There are some days where they're given away, when literally the donations are piling up and they just don't have room for it, and so they will give away clothes. Just you get a grocery bag or a hefty bag, and you can fill it up with whatever you can fit in it. So there's that. And that's just the outreach ministries that are in communities that I'm aware of, or that are in my community that I'm aware of. There's also a ton of cases where church members will help out fellow church members. Several years back, my mother's house caught fire. Was not a total loss, like the building was still standing. Part of the floor had collapsed, but a bunch of church members came out from my church. They helped us move. I mean, that house was 90% of the stuff in that house was a loss. What didn't get burned in the fire was destroyed via smoke and water. But it was still stuff that had to be gone through. And my mother at the time was a widow. Still is. So, a lot of people came out. The church was willing to provide temporary shelter. There was beds and cabinets and foodstuffs and appliances, clothing that all had to be gotten out of the house and sorted through. The church helped with that. Fast forward, because my dad died long and short, that house that was my mother's ended up being willed to me. It's a long, complicated story. I did not take the house out from under her. It was something that she willfully did. But I told backstory time. When my dad got sick, I told him that I would make sure that my mother was taken care of. Well, he was unable to get a huge life insurance policy due to some health issues that he had his whole life. My mother works a part-time job because she had already kind of done the career thing, but she didn't stay in long enough to get retirement. And Dad wasn't ready to retire yet, so there were limited funds for her to take care of herself, and I told Dad that I would make sure that she was taken care of. Well, we ended up rebuilding that house and adding on to it a little bit, and she lives in a mother-in-law suite on that house, so I'm able to take care of her. But anyway, where I was going is when we were getting the house near completion, we had gotten money together with homeowners insurance, which the house was underinsured, and we had taken out a loan to pay for it. Well, the contractor had a couple budget overruns, and we were getting down towards the end of the available money, and fellow church members came out and they helped us paint the entire house. My mother, wife, and I had picked out colors, put them in the appropriate rooms, got out paint trays and everything, and we went to town. There was at least 10 of us, I'm thinking, total painting this house. So they helped with that. Another thing that our church does is they do missions in various places, trying to not only spread beliefs, but help out in other communities. I've been a member of a church that did a mission trip to a rough neighborhood out of state, and they ended up throwing a massive family-friendly block party, essentially, because there was nothing in this particular area good or safe for the kids to get into. And we helped start a church in that area. But anyway, that's just some of the things that churches can do. Now, if you started taxing them any amount, first off, there are churches that I know of and have known of that can barely keep the lights on. So there would be a certain percentage of churches that would just buckle instantly under the tax burden. and it's not due to mismanagement. There was one church that a friend of mine went to forever ago. It was literally a double wide that had it had like an office and 2 bathrooms. That's all the building was. So it was a very small church. It just started out. The pastor was a younger man just starting a family himself. So there was not a abundance of money going on, and they had to buy land and buy the trailer and pay to set it up and all that. And there are a lot of churches that have seen shrinkage in the past decade or two that would have a difficult time affording a pay cut. If not impossible, they would have to reduce what they do in the community or for church members. So I don't necessarily see that taxing churches will be a good thing for communities, especially communities where churches are doing stuff for people that are in tough situations. You know, I remember several years back, my wife ended up in the hospital for about a week with Lyme disease. She couldn't use her legs from the knees down. And the timing on it worked out good because I had to stay at work. I couldn't take off a lot. I think I took off 1 day from it. I couldn't afford to take off a bunch of time. And so she's in the hospital. Thankfully, the kids were able to stay with a few different grandparents, and they were okay. But I know that if I had called the church and asked, hey, here's what I'm doing. I work night shift. My wife's in the hospital. And I mean, they knew about it. There were people coming out to visit and check in on us. But if I'd said, I need some sitters for the kids because my work schedule through the week, when I'm not at home, when I'm at home, I'm asleep. When I'm not at home, I'm either driving or at work. They would have helped. They would have done whatever they could have. And that's a me personally story. That's not me telling you about someone else. But anyway, if the church had to cover a tax burden, a lot of smaller churches would end up not being able to do some of the good things just for communities that they do anyway, locally and abroad. Something else that I think is a huge strike against it is one of the things about having a 501c3 is you cannot, the church or paid staff cannot actively campaign politically. They do that, they lose their 501c3 status. Now, I have gone to churches that were majority Republican. I've gone to churches that were majority Democrat. I've gone to churches that were kind of split. I've been asked to leave churches. It's a whole other story entirely. But anyway, there was the thing about that is none of these churches could get active politically. The most politically active I've ever seen a church is, well, there were 2 times, you can take your pick, is one was used as a voting district, or as a voting headquarters for a district. So the voting machines were in there during local and state and federal elections. The only other time I've ever seen a preacher really talk politics, as far as naming names, is when Obama was running for his first term. This was 07, 08. And this was when a lot of, to my memory anyway, conspiracy theories were becoming noticed on the internet. And there were people saying that, well, Obama's just the Antichrist. Things like that. And this preacher had seen it, and he's like, you know what? I'm not going to get political, but I've heard people say that Obama's just the Antichrist and blah, blah, blah. And I'll just tell you this, he is not that smooth of a talker. Because if he were the Antichrist, he could get George W. Bush and Hillary Clinton in a room genuinely shaking hands and happy to see each other. That's all he said. He didn't campaign for or against anybody. He simply said that Obama wasn't the Antichrist, which I thought was hilarious that he addressed that from the pulpit. But I think that putting churches or even religious institutions in general in politics is a bad idea. And here's why I say that. The United States was founded on freedom of religion. Or freedom from religion if you choose. That's your call. Well, whenever you take away someone's 501c3 status and they can campaign, a lot of times they probably would. A lot of businesses that are not 501c3 do donate to what they can. They'll fund PACs, do fundraisers, whatever. And even though as a Christian, there are things that go on in the world and in the United States today that I don't necessarily like from a Christian perspective. The United States was founded on freedom of religion, and people got a right to do what they do. That's fine. The thing that I don't like about the idea of churches lobbying politically is it would open the door to, in whatever county, state, or even nationally, whatever religious organization, whether it's Catholics, Baptists, Muslims, Buddhists, whatever, has the most money, they could get the most change for things the way they want. Now, I would not like to be ruled by the code of the Quran as a Christian. I would not like to have to live up to the laws and traditions. Suppose that people have been able to lobby for everything and I just lived in a heavy Muslim area. And there were a lot of Muslim or laws based in the Quran passed in this area, but I was a Christian. I would not like to live like that. So, because of that, if people have spiritual beliefs or no beliefs, I don't want to come down on someone else's beliefs with my own beliefs. Believe it or not, I do think that Judeo-Christian based churches and religious institutions would end up having the most money to lobby. But I don't think that it'd be a good thing. First off, if I wouldn't want that done to me, I don't want to do it to someone else. I don't want to ramp up laws that are based in Christian theology, so that Muslims have to abide by Christian-based laws. Now, I say murder's illegal. Okay, well, guess what? That's in the Bible. Well, you also killed someone and hurt their entire family. So, there is that. But anyway, that's kind of the gist of where I wanted to go today. Let me know what you think. Not a fan of revoking 501c3 from any religious institution. I think that the trade-off financially versus the potential for lobbying is worth leaving as it is. So, hope y'all have a good rest of your day. Give us a like, hit the notification bell if you want to see when new stuff goes up. This has been another Cruise with Smooth. Take care.